Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Going Deeper. My name is Andrews, and with me today is Daniel Wall. Welcome, Daniel.
Hi, everyone. Hi,
We haven't
Anders.
seen you in Going Deeper for a few episodes, but I'm really glad to
Yes.
have you back. And today is a really exciting topic for me. We as a church have started studying the letters to Timothy. And so it's Paul writing to Timothy. And we as a church, we have a sermon series about it. We have a Bible plan that we're all reading together and sharing our insights, sharing our prayers, sharing our thoughts. It's really awesome to kind of connect even on that level as reading the Bible together and praying together.
Yeah.
So if you're watching this, and it doesn't really matter whether you are in Vilnius or in some other city in Lithuania, or really doesn't matter where you are, if you would like to read this Bible plan with us, read Timothy letters with us, just join us. If you go into search on the app, find Journey Vilnius and add as a friend. And then we will add you, and you can read with us and pray with us as we go along through these letters. Now, for me, I love just the whole historical aspect, of kind of the context of the background of this whole thing. And so I was reading up about Ephesus, and I was making some really cool insights, things that I never really kind of picked up or noticed maybe. So Ephesus, at the time was a huge city. It was like the third largest city in the entire Roman Empire. It was 250,000 people. And just to give you a comparison, London at the time was just 30,000, and Ephesus was 250,000. That's like insane. And it had temples, it had schools, it had theaters, gyms, you name it, they had it all. And so when we're reading those letters, about false teachers, you can picture this cosmopolitan, huge city, with ideas flowing in from all over the place, right? And so there is this
Mm.
young church trying to influence the life of the city. And it was a huge church too. They had lots of people in church. It was a mega church. Thousands of people were a part of the church. And we know that Paul spent 2 years every single day on the streets, in the synagogues, all over the place, all over the city, preaching the gospel every single day. And there was this one young dude with him, it was Timothy. He was just barely, past his teenage years, as far as I know. And so, right there in the midst of it, he was being trained on the job by Paul. That's the best discipleship you can have, I guess. Right.
Yes, I agree.
And so now, we're reading these letters, and he's young, and there are people with all their philosophies, and you name it, and they're older, and you've got to respect your elders and blah blah blah, all of that. And here's this youngster who's now in charge of leading the church in Ephesus, and Paul is writing to encourage him. And that's amazing. And I think there are so many lessons for us to take on. And
Mm.
is there any particular passage, Daniel, that you like in those letters as you've started reading? What are, some of your maybe insights on the letters?
Um, wow, that is a very good question. I think if you go through those letters, you'll notice some certain sections that's really empowering and powerful. Um, I think for me personally, um, the section I enjoyed the most that I've read so far is, I think it's from 1 Timothy 1, verse 12 to 17. where it basically gives an overview of Paul's testimony. And what is just so incredibly empowering about Paul's whole testimony, and if you look at Paul's life, is to see how God used Paul to further his kingdom. Despite the fact that Paul was just an ordinary man with so many sins, God still used Paul to perform these important works. And then you get to read about it in 1 Timothy again, that God is still using Paul, and as you mentioned, now discipling this young guy into ministry. So that's one of the sections that I really found, wow. It's just a reminder that even an ordinary guy with that has sins, and is not always capable of living up to God's standards. God still loves you, and God still accepts you and still uses you to further his kingdom. So yeah, I think that was quite a empowering passage for me. That I found.
That is quite amazing, isn't it? Now, we at the church, in addition to reading the Bible together, we have the sermon series. And so our pastor, Luke, has just started last Sunday with a message kind of to introduce the whole series. And we're calling the series Stoke the Fire. How do you stoke the fire? How do you keep it burning as a disciple of Jesus, as a follower of Jesus? How do you stoke the fire in the church, like in the entire church, not just like a corporate body, not just an individual? So these two things together, what would be your thoughts on that? How do you keep your fire, your passion for Jesus going in your life?
So in my life, I would say there's many factors that comes to play in this. And I'll give you a bit of an overview of what I feel, and then I'll try to link it back to what I've read in Timothy so far.
Yeah.
But yeah, first of all, I would say spending time with God in front of his altar. I've recently been going through a series of becoming before the altar, going in front of God. Spending time with him to grow your relationship with him. It's like your source of power, your ultimate source of power is in front of God. And that's how you keep the fire burning, by spending time with him in his word, prayer, and doing the things he wants you to do. Secondly, I think to start igniting people around you and keeping their fire burning as well is to encourage one another. I mean, we read in the Bible that 2 is better than 1. And 3 is even more better. Just imagine you're trying to make a fire with 1 wooden log. You won't really get much of a fire. But if you have 2 and 3, maybe 4 logs, you'll end up with a huge fire. And I think there's some certain responsibility for us as Christians to keep on encouraging one another, to keep our fires lit and keep our fires burning. And in such a way, we are constantly kind of lighting people around us, so that they catch the fire as well. They catch the light as well, and they start burning. And if you see a brother or sister that, the light is dim, the fire is dimmed a bit, and they need some fuel to get the fire going again, is to maybe journey with them. Do a few weeks of walking together, Bible studies, join a life group if you feel in your life, oh, my fire is burning out, maybe join a life group. That's another way. So yeah, personally, spending time with God and spending time with community that's in God's house, such as joining a life group. And then the third thing is to ignite one another and keep one another accountable.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah. And then bringing this back to Timothy, where what I've read up until now is, first thing is basically the warning Timothy gives, or we read in Timothy about the false teachings. I think false teachings is like impacting us so much that it can start dimming down our fire. So we're not hearing the truth anymore, and we should sway away from that and start going towards true teachings and avoid the false teachings and be wary of them. The second thing that I've read up until now in Timothy is how Paul is discipling young Timothy, and they're going on a journey together. It's just an example of how we need to disciple one another, and especially the youth, because the youth will eventually be the leaders of tomorrow. And then, I think that's
Talk to me a little
2
more about
points.
this thing about the youth, because you're leading the youth group. You have a bunch of teenagers around you, and
Yes.
and so you're investing yourself into them, kind of like
Yes.
Paul was doing it with Timothy. Why is it so important to invest into teenagers who kind of tend to be a pain in the butt sometimes, and they're grumpy and all those things, and unstable? Why work with them?
Wow. I think there's many different reasons. First of all, as I mentioned, the youth will be the leaders of tomorrow. And I believe that the earlier you invest in a teenager or in a child, I wouldn't say the more easier it will be for the teenager, but I think the earlier you start investing and helping them, the more ready they'll be to face whatever challenge comes their way. Secondly, I was also a teenager once, and I also needed guidance. I had questions and answers, and I always also wanted to have a community where I, as a Christian, belonged to. And if I think back about those times, I was so grateful that there were always someone that was there for me and that was leading a youth group that I could join and attend. And for me, it's just, I want to be there for the youth as well, to encourage them, to try and help them, to guide them, to try and answer their questions. And I just have a really strong responsibility towards kids and teenagers, and trying to make sure that there is some kind of a platform where they can meet with other teenagers and journey on the same topics. Or maybe they have questions. Maybe I'm not the perfect person to answer them, but then I can guide them to another leader in the church, or an adult, or someone who can guide them on a specific issue. And I think that's one of the most important things for me, is
Yeah.
to be there.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel, for sharing that, because it even your response kind of reflects, your heart for the young people, and how caring and nurturing and passionate you are about discipling young people. And I think that is also the heart of God. I think God cares about young people,
Mm.
and I think he loves young people, and he uses young people. If we look at the
Mm.
scripture, we absolutely
That's
see over and over and over how God calls young people,
mm.
whether it's David, tending to sheep, and God, calls
Yes.
him to be king, or Mary, hey, you're gonna have Jesus, um, as a young teenager, right? Timothy is another, and Jeremiah, he was 17,
Mm.
and he was a prophet, and has a
Yes.
long book in the in the Old Testament, uh, with his name on it. God
Mm.
calls young people, and he uses them in mighty
Yes.
ways. So I think, the verse in Timothy where Paul says, to Timothy, don't let anyone look down on you because of your youth.
Mm.
I think it's so true
Yes.
even today. And we don't
Yes.
want anyone looking down on our youth, because
Mm.
God has a passion for them.
Yes.
Amen.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm
Amen.
really excited
True
about
on that.
this, and I'm so eager to see what God will do in the young people in the church, and
Mm.
that the process of discipleship would go on and continue, um, in the church for the young people, and not just for
Yes.
the young people, for all of us, really.
Mm.
Um, and we have so much to learn, and we need also those people who have traveled the road before us, and
Mm.
who can stoke our fires. I like how you
Yes.
said, we need each other, we need community
Mm.
to do this. And I think that's the perfect, picture of what discipleship looks like. It's never solo, it's always in the
Yes.
context of community. And Timothy traveled, with Paul all over.
Mm.
And as Paul was, every single day for 2 years preaching in Ephesus, I'm sure Timothy was right beside him the entire time, and
Yes.
learning on the job. And I think that is
Mm.
part of discipleship too, that we've got to do
Mm.
and have. So yeah, thank you, Daniel, so much for sharing. This is an
Okay.
exciting series that we have in the church. And hey, those watching, if you're in Vilnius, uh, join us. We started live services. Come and join us. Come and be a part. And if you have some health issues, we assure you that we take all the precautions and we follow all the protocols. But also, if you would like to watch it online, you can. We still are
Mm.
broadcasting our services online, so please tune in and be a part of our journey of discipleship. Thank you so much for tuning in. We can't wait to see you on Sunday and even next week as we have our next Going Deeper episode. Thanks, Daniel, so much.
Thank you, Andres.
Bye.
Bye.